Alright, so two things to cover in this video. First, the Hulk Hogan documentary that was coming to Netflix starring Chris Hemsworth, it's being canceled, and for a very weird reason. Second, the Steamboat Willie horror movie just got a very interesting cast, and not one I was suspecting at all. Let's start with Hulk Hogan's bio. The Netflix movie that was coming out, Chris Hemsworth has been bulking up for this, but it doesn't look like he needs to anymore. Hulk Hogan goes on in this article, and I'm going to paraphrase some of this, talking about how great this script was. This is like the greatest thing he's ever read. The writer, who is Scott Silver, he wrote The Joker, Wolf of Wall Street, and a bunch of other movies. He was so excited, saying this is the best thing he's ever written. And Hulk Hogan said in a quote, "When I read it, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is really good. At the time, I was in a space where I told him the positive stuff about wrestling." So I'm sure all the little dark details didn't get out until later, or there was a whole bunch of back and forth. And he's talking about working with this writer for 3 to 4 years. And then he starts talking about how powerful this movie is, how powerful the script is. But ultimately it says Hulk Hogan pulled out of the film when the opportunity presented itself because of concern that the film might have been the last thing people remembered him for. Which is kind of odd, because I think that's exactly what you would want, right? But we could be wrong. He mentions in another quote, "Spent about 3 to 4 years with this writer going back and forth. When I read it, it was just very, very dark," if that would be the right word. But it was probably what the public may want to see. When I read it, I was like, oh my gosh, if this thing comes out. There was talk that Chris Hemsworth had never played a real person before, and he could probably win an Oscar. This thing is so powerful. I said, that's great. Everyone's going to do really great. Then I'm going to be left here alone. And that might be the last thing people remember me for. So I just was moving forward at the time. And when they, business-wise, missed a date, there was an option for me to pull out, and I did. Now that reason right there sounds a little weird, as if Hogan was going to be too concerned that the movie was going to be remembered over him. Like Chris Hemsworth was going to do such a good job that they would remember him as Hulk Hogan rather than Hulk Hogan as Hulk Hogan, you know, Terry Bollea. And if that's the case, that sounds a little egotistical to me. Like, your ego won't allow a representation of you to be remembered. Does that make sense? Like, he totally skipped out on this movie and quit because he was afraid the movie was going to do too good and he wasn't in it. Or could it be that some of the dark stuff of the wrestling got out? Maybe some of his controversial issues that we remember having years back. Maybe that's what he was worried about getting out. That's what they would remember him for. The controversial stuff with his divorce. And, you know, if you know, you know. That's all I'll say. But maybe that's what he was worried about. Either way, it didn't feel like once he got into the writing and further into production that this was something he was comfortable with after all. I don't know. But he's out. The movie's done. Moving on. Let me know what your thoughts are of that. I was kind of anxious to see that movie, so I'm disappointed that it's canceled. Alright, now moving on to the Steamboat Willie horror movie. This has gotten really interesting. I was expecting this to be a really low budget, crappy movie with a lot of no-name people, and here we have 3 very recognizable names in this movie now. Get ready. Starting with 2 people from the Terrifier franchise. First of which is going to be Kailey Hyman. She appeared in Terrifier 2 and made a return appearance in Terrifier 3. Says that she will play a key character in Screamboat, but that character has not been released, so we don't know what her role is going to be. The next one from the Terrifier franchise, get this one. It says that David Howard Thornton, aka Art the Clown, is going to be playing Willie. Now that's going to be super interesting. We know his style. Besides playing Art the Clown, he also played the Grinch in Mean One, which is the horror parody of the Grinch. Kind of played a very similar character to Art the Clown in that, but it was good. I'm wondering if he's going to bring that same character to Screamboat. Granted, it's an interesting character, but I think he needs to change it up a little bit for this one. Either way, it's a big name for this movie. I think it's going to be good. Now, the oddball in the group. This one kind of threw me for a loop. Ready? Tyler Posey is also in this movie. Again, says he plays a key character, but does not mention what that character or role is going to be. I was kind of shocked that Tyler Posey was in this movie. More shocked that David Howard Thornton was in this movie. So I'm like, we're getting some pretty big names here for Screamboat. Maybe this won't be such a crappy movie after all. That being said, I'm all down for, I was going to say low budget movies, but I'm not sure how low budget this is going to be now with a cast like this. Kailey Hyman, I didn't hate her in the Terrifier franchise. I think she did pretty good. But I love Tyler Posey in especially Teen Wolf. I thought he does a fantastic job. And again, we got David Howard Thornton, who I'm hoping he can bring something different to this character. Because again, the Mean One and Art the Clown kind of played very similar characters. Let's try to mix it up a little bit. But I would love to know what your thoughts are of the cast for Steamboat Willie horror movie. Leave it down in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe button on your way out. And I'll see you at the concession stands.